It was an unusually quiet evening in the village of Alyakosi, where the rustle of palm fronds and the distant chatter of crickets served as the soundtrack to life. Ayodele, a humble farmer known for his gentle nature and unyielding dedication to his work, was returning home after a long day in the fields. The moon hung low in the sky, casting silvery shadows across the earth as he approached the small clay house he shared with his wife, Zainab. But tonight, the warm glow of the lantern inside their home felt different, dimmer, as if the walls themselves held their breath. As Ayodele pushed the door open, his brow furrowed at the sight of Zainab sitting by the wooden table, staring at a folded piece of paper clutched in her hands. Her usually radiant face was clouded with unease, her fingers trembling as if the letter carried a weight far heavier than its fragile form suggested. Startled by his entrance, she quickly stuffed the letter into her waistband, her movements awkward and hurried. "What is that, Zainab?" Ayodele asked, his voice laced with curiosity. "Nothing, just a note from the market women," she replied too quickly, avoiding his gaze. Ayodele's heart sank. In their years together, Zainab had never been one to hide anything from him. Later that night, after Zainab had gone to bed, Ayodele couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in his chest. Something was wrong. Quietly, he tiptoed back to the kitchen where Zainab had been sitting. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on the faint corner of a folded paper sticking out from beneath a clay pot. His hand trembled as he reached for it, unwrapping the letter as if it might bite. The words on the page were written in a hurried scrawl, but their message was clear. "You must meet me at the riverbank tomorrow night. Do not tell anyone. The promise you made cannot be broken, Chief Ola." Ayodele's vision blurred as rage and confusion overtook him. Chief Ola, the wealthiest and most influential man in Alyakosi, was no stranger to scandal. Known for his many wives and mistresses, he had long been whispered about in the village. But why would he be writing to Zainab, Ayodele's Zainab? 1,000 questions raced through his mind, each more painful than the last. For hours, Ayodele sat in the dim light, the letter clutched in his hands. Dawn broke, but sleep did not come. When Zainab stirred and found him sitting there, her face drained of color. She didn't need to ask why, the letter in his hands said it all. "Zainab," Ayodele began, his voice raw with emotion. "What is this? What promise have you made with Chief Ola?" Zainab's lips parted, but no words came. She looked away, her eyes brimming with tears. "It's not what you think," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Then tell me what it is," Ayodele demanded, his voice rising for the first time in years. But Zainab simply shook her head, her tears spilling over. "I can't, Ayodele. Please trust me." Trust? The word felt hollow in that moment. How could he trust her when she refused to share the truth? Driven by a mix of anger and heartbreak, Ayodele stormed out of the house, the letter still clutched in his hand. He needed answers, and he was determined to get them, no matter the cost. Ayodele spent the day visiting friends and elders, probing for any information that might shed light on his wife's connection to Chief Ola. Most shrugged off his questions, unwilling to speak ill of the man who held so much power. But one elder, Baba Olanyi, gave him a knowing look. "Chief Ola has his hands in many places he shouldn't," Baba Olanyi said cryptically. "If you're wise, my son, you'll tread carefully. Some truths are too dangerous to uncover." The old man's warning only fueled Ayodele's determination. That evening, as the village prepared to sleep, Ayodele found himself at the riverbank, hiding among the tall reeds. If Zainab was meeting Chief Ola, he would see it with his own eyes. The moonlight danced on the water's surface as the hours crept by. Finally, Zainab appeared, her figure silhouetted against the moonlight. She looked around nervously before stepping closer to the river's edge. Moments later, another figure emerged from the shadows, Chief Ola himself. Ayodele's blood ran cold as he watched the two of them speak in hushed tones. He couldn't hear their words, but their body language told a story of tension and secrecy. Then, something unexpected happened. Chief Ola reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, ornate necklace, handing it to Zainab. She hesitated, but eventually took it, her hands shaking. Ayadil's heart shattered. Unable to contain his emotions, he stepped out from his hiding place. "What is the meaning of this?" he bellowed, his voice echoing across the riverbank. Zainab froze, her face a mask of guilt and fear. Chief Ola, however, remained calm, his lips curling into a sly smile. "Ah, Ayadil," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "It seems your wife hasn't told you everything." The chief's words hung heavy in the air, a cruel taunt that only deepened Ayadil's pain. As Zainab stood trembling, caught between her husband and the chief, Ayadil realized that whatever secrets she was hiding would change their lives forever. The air was thick with tension as Chief Ola's smirk lingered in the moonlight. Zainab looked as if the earth itself might swallow her whole, her hands clutching the necklace tightly, as though it could shield her from the storm brewing in Ayadil's eyes. "I demand answers," Ayadil said, his voice quivering with a mix of anger and despair. "Zainab, what have you done? Why are you meeting this man in secret? What is this promise he speaks of?" Zainab opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Chief Ola took a deliberate step forward, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the riverbank. "Ayadil, you're a good man," he said, his tone syrupy yet venomous. "But you have no idea of the sacrifices your wife has made to protect you, to protect your family. You should be thanking her, not interrogating her." Ayadil's fists clenched, the words cutting him like knives. "Protect me? By sneaking around in the dark with the likes of you? What kind of protection is this, Zainab?" Tears streamed down Zainab's face. Her voice was shaky when she finally spoke. "Ayadil, please, you don't understand. It's not what you think." "Then tell me." Ayadil roared, his voice echoing across the still waters. "Tell me the truth, or by the gods, I will leave this place tonight and never return." Zainab's knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, sobbing. Chief Ola let out a low chuckle. "If you really want the truth, Ayadil," he said, his voice tinged with mockery, "you'll have to ask the elders. They know what this is about. I'm simply a part of an old agreement, one made long before you even knew Zainab." Without another word, the chief turned and walked away, his silhouette disappearing into the shadows. Ayadil stood frozen, torn between comforting his wife and chasing after the man who had turned his world upside down. After a moment, he knelt beside Zainab, his voice softer now. "Zainab, please. What agreement? What promise? Why won't you tell me?" Through her tears, Zainab whispered, "I was trying to protect you, Ayadil. I thought I could handle it on my own. I didn't want you to get hurt." But her cryptic explanation only deepened Ayadil's confusion. He helped her to her feet and guided her back home, his mind racing with questions. That night, sleep evaded him once again. As Zainab lay beside him, her breathing uneven, Ayadil stared at the ceiling, replaying the chief's words over and over in his mind. The next morning, Ayadil set out to speak with Baba Olanei, the village elder who had hinted at secrets the day before. When he arrived at the elder's compound, he found the old man sitting under the shade of a baobab tree, chewing on a twig of kola nut. "Baba," Ayadil began, his voice heavy with desperation, "I need the truth. What is this agreement between Chief Ola and Zainab? He said you would know." Baba Olanei's face darkened, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by a grave expression. He sighed deeply and gestured for Ayadil to sit beside him. "My son," Baba Olanei began, "there are things in this village's past that were meant to stay buried. But I see now that the past has found its way into the present, and you deserve to know." The elder took a long pause, as if gathering the courage to speak. "Many years ago, before you married Zainab, her family was in great trouble. Her father had borrowed money from Chief Ola to save their farm during a terrible drought. But the chief's kindness came with a price. When the family couldn't repay the debt, the chief demanded something else in return, a vow from Zainab. A vow? Ayadil asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Baba Olanei nodded. The chief claimed that Zainab must promise to grant him a favor of his choosing when the time came. It was an unthinkable demand, but her family was desperate. They had no choice but to agree. Zainab was only a girl then, and she didn't understand the weight of the promise she was making. Ayadil's hands trembled as he processed the elder's words. What kind of favor? That, I do not know, Baba Olanei admitted. But the chief is a man of greed and ambition. Whatever he wants from Zainab, it is not honorable. Ayadil stood abruptly, anger coursing through his veins. How could her family allow this? How could they sell her future like this? Desperation makes people do unimaginable things, Baba Olanei said solemnly. But you must be careful, Ayadil. The chief is not a man to be trifled with. If you confront him, you risk not only your own safety but Zainab's as well. Despite the elder's warning, Ayadil's resolve hardened. He would not let Chief Ola control his wife's life, or his own. That evening, he returned home, determined to confront Zainab again. Zainab, he said, his voice firm yet gentle, I know about the promise you made. Baba Olanei told me everything. Zainab's face crumpled, and she sank into a chair, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I didn't have a choice, Ayadil, she said. My family would have lost everything. I thought I could handle it on my own. Ayadil knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. We'll face this together, he said, his voice filled with determination. No more secrets. No more hiding. Whatever the chief wants, we'll find a way to stop him. For the first time in days, a flicker of hope crossed Zainab's face. But deep down, both of them knew that standing up to Chief Ola would not be easy. The chief was a man of immense power and influence, and crossing him could bring consequences far beyond their imagination. As the sun set over Alyakosi that night, Ayadil and Zainab sat together in silence, their hands intertwined. The battle ahead would test their love, their courage, and their very souls. But for now, they found strength in each other, knowing that their bond was the only thing that could withstand the storm to come. The days following Ayadil's conversation with Baba Olanei were filled with unease. The once vibrant and welcoming atmosphere of the village seemed to change overnight. Neighbors avoided meeting Ayadil's gaze, their usual chatter replaced by hushed whispers. It was as if the very air carried the weight of secrets. Ayadil could feel it pressing down on him, urging him to act, but the question of how gnawed at him relentlessly. He knew one thing for certain. Confronting Chief Ola outright would be foolish without a plan. Zainab, on the other hand, moved like a shadow through the house. The guilt she carried seemed to drain her spirit, and Ayadil could no longer bear to see her suffer alone. One evening, as they sat in their modest kitchen, he took her hand and spoke softly. Zainab, he began, his voice steady but resolute, I need you to tell me everything. No more half-truths, no more secrets. What exactly did the chief demand from you? What favor does he think you owe him? Her eyes filled with tears, but this time she didn't look away. Instead, she inhaled deeply, as if summoning the courage to speak. He hasn't said directly, she confessed. But I know it has to do with his plan to claim more land in the village. He's been pressuring families to sell their farms to him, and those who refuse, they don't fare well. Ayadil frowned. What does that have to do with you? Zainab hesitated, her voice trembling as she continued. He told me that when the time came, I would have to convince you to sell our farm to him. He wants our land, Ayadil. He's been watching us for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. Ayadil's stomach churned. The farm was their livelihood, the foundation of their dreams. To sell it would mean not only losing their income but their sense of identity. Worse, it would mean surrendering to the man who had cast a shadow over their marriage. "No," Ayodele said firmly. "I won't let that happen. If he thinks we'll bow to him, he's mistaken." Zainab's face twisted in anguish. "But Ayodele, he's not a man who takes no for an answer. You've heard the stories, people who defy him face ruin, or worse." "That's why we need to be smart," Ayodele replied. "We can't let him control us. There has to be a way to fight back." The following morning, Ayodele began his search for allies. He visited neighboring farmers and families who had resisted Chief Ola's advances in the past. Most were too afraid to speak openly, their fear of retaliation evident in their cautious words and darting eyes. But a few shared whispers of resistance, small acts of defiance that had gone unnoticed by the chief. One such ally was Ifani, a young but resourceful man who had recently returned to the village after studying law in the city. Ifani was outspoken and unafraid, a rare combination in a place where silence often meant survival. When Ayodele explained the situation, Ifani's eyes lit up with determination. "The chief's power isn't as absolute as he wants us to believe," Ifani said. "He operates through intimidation and manipulation, but there are cracks in his foundation. If we can expose him, we might stand a chance." "How?" Ayodele asked. "For starters," Ifani said, "we need proof of his corruption, something tangible that can rally the community against him. If we show the village that he's not invincible, they'll find the courage to stand with us." Encouraged by Ifani's confidence, Ayodele and Zainab began gathering information. Zainab, still burdened by her past dealings with the chief, took a significant risk by speaking with one of his former aides, a woman named Mareo who had fallen out of favor and left his inner circle. Mareo was hesitant at first, her distrust evident in the way she avoided direct answers. But when Zainab shared her own story of coercion and fear, Mareo's defenses softened. "The chief thrives on secrecy," Mareo admitted. "He keeps records of everything, deals, debts, promises, all hidden in his private study. If you can get your hands on those documents, you'll have what you need to expose him." The idea of breaking into Chief Ola's residence seemed unthinkable, but Ayodele knew it was their best chance. With Ifani's help, they devised a plan. They would wait for the night of the chief's annual feast, when he would be distracted entertaining dignitaries and village leaders. Zainab's familiarity with the household's layout would guide them to the study, while Ifani would stand guard to ensure they weren't caught. When the night of the feast arrived, Ayodele's heart pounded as he and Zainab approached the chief's grand estate. The sounds of laughter and music spilled into the night, masking their footsteps as they slipped through the shadows. The study was located on the upper floor, its door secured with a heavy lock. Zainab's hands trembled as she produced a small metal tool, a lockpick she had borrowed from Mareo. "I never thought I'd have to do something like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're braver than you think," Ayodele replied, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. After what felt like an eternity, the lock clicked open, and they stepped into the study. The room was dimly lit, its shelves lined with books and ledgers. Ayodele began searching through the documents, his fingers moving quickly but carefully. Finally, he found a ledger marked with the chief's insignia. Inside were pages of names, dates, and transactions, evidence of bribes, coercion, and illegal land acquisitions. "This is it," Ayodele said, his voice filled with a mix of triumph and urgency. But just as they prepared to leave, they heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through them as they realized their escape route was about to be cut off. With no time to spare, Ayodele pushed Zainab into a narrow alcove behind a curtain. He clutched the ledger tightly, praying that whoever was coming wouldn't notice their presence. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It wasn't the chief but one of his guards, a burly man with sharp eyes. Ayodele held his breath as the guard scanned the room, his gaze lingering on the desk where the ledger had been. As the guard moved closer, Ayadil prepared to step forward, ready to create a distraction so Zainab could escape. But before he could act, a loud commotion erupted downstairs. The guard froze, his attention diverted by the noise. Taking advantage of the distraction, Ayadil and Zainab slipped out of the study and down the back stairs, their hearts racing. They didn't stop running until they were safely away from the estate, the ledger still clutched in Ayadil's hands. That night, as they pored over the documents in their small home, Ayadil and Zainab realized the magnitude of what they had uncovered. The chief's corruption ran deeper than they had imagined, implicating not only local officials but also outside figures who had aided his schemes. "This is more than just about us," Zainab said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "This is about the entire village. If we don't act now, he'll keep hurting people." Ayadil nodded, his resolve stronger than ever. "We'll expose him. Together." As dawn broke over Alyakosi, Ayadil and Zainab knew their fight was far from over. But for the first time in weeks, they felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that their love and courage could stand against even the darkest forces. The aftermath of the marketplace confrontation left Alyakosi simmering with a volatile mix of hope and uncertainty. The villagers, for the first time in years, felt the stirrings of collective power. Yet, the shadow of Chief Ola loomed heavily, his retreat a temporary setback rather than a sign of defeat. Ayadil, Zainab, and Ifani knew that their fight was far from over. The chief's silence in the days following the public exposure was unnerving, a clear indication that he was regrouping. For Ayadil and Zainab, life became a delicate dance of vigilance and resolve. Friends and neighbors stopped by their modest home, some offering quiet words of encouragement, others warning them to be careful. Rumors swirled of the chief mobilizing his loyalists, preparing to retaliate in ways that wouldn't just target them but the entire village. One evening, as Ayadil sat sharpening his tools in the dim light of an oil lamp, a soft knock came at the door. Zainab, wary, peered through a small gap before opening it cautiously. To their surprise, it was Mareo, the former aide to Chief Ola who had first hinted at the existence of the incriminating ledger. "I had to come," she whispered, stepping inside quickly. Her face was pale, her eyes darting nervously. "The chief is planning something dangerous. He's furious that the village dared to stand against him, but he's focused on you too. He sees you as the root of this rebellion." Ayadil frowned. "What's he planning?" "He's reaching out to his contacts outside the village," Mareo explained. "Thugs, enforcers, men who won't hesitate to use violence. He wants to make an example of you, to show the others what happens when they defy him." Zainab's breath caught, fear flashing in her eyes. "Then we need to leave," she said urgently, turning to Ayadil. "We can't put the entire village in danger because of us." "No," Ayadil said firmly. "Running won't solve anything. If we leave, he'll tighten his grip on Alyakosi and crush the spirit we've worked so hard to ignite. We have to find a way to stop him before he makes his next move." Mareo hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "There's one thing you should know," she said. "The chief has been hiding something else, something even more damaging than the ledger. These are copies of records I kept when I worked for him. They show his connections to illegal activities outside the village, smuggling, bribery, even human trafficking. If this gets out, it won't just bring him down here. It will destroy his reputation and his network everywhere." Ayadil and Ifani pored over the documents late into the night. The evidence was damning, far worse than they had anticipated. But the question remained, how could they use it effectively without endangering themselves and the village further? The next morning, Ifani announced a bold plan. "We're going to take this to the city," he declared. "There's a journalist I trust, a woman named Amara who's been investigating corruption in the region. If we can get this information to her, she'll ensure it's published widely. The chief won't be able to suppress it once it's out in the open. The plan was fraught with risks. Getting to the city meant passing through roads controlled by the chief's men. Even if they succeeded, there was no guarantee that the journalist could act quickly enough to protect Olyakosi from the chief's immediate retaliation. But it was their best chance. The journey was planned meticulously. Ifani and Ayadil would take the documents to the city while Zainab stayed behind to maintain the illusion that everything was normal. Mareo, with her knowledge of the chief's operations, would act as their guide through the more dangerous areas. The night before their departure, Ayadil and Zainab sat together under the stars. The weight of their situation hung heavily between them, but there was also a quiet strength in their union. "No matter what happens," Ayadil said, taking Zainab's hand, "we'll face it together. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about giving Olyakosi a chance to be free." Zainab nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "I believe in you, Ayadil. And I'll do everything I can to protect what we're fighting for here." The journey began before dawn. Ayadil, Ifani, and Mareo moved cautiously, avoiding main roads and relying on hidden paths that Mareo had learned during her time in the chief's service. The documents were concealed in a waterproof satchel, strapped tightly to Ifani's back. The first leg of the journey was uneventful, but as they approached the halfway point, their luck ran out. A group of armed men emerged from the underbrush, blocking their path. Their leader, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. "Chief Ola sends his regards," he said with a sneer. "Hand over the bag, and maybe we'll let you live." Ayadil's heart raced as he exchanged a glance with Ifani. They were outnumbered and outarmed, but surrendering the documents would mean losing everything they had fought for. Thinking quickly, Mareo stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Let me talk to them," she whispered to Ayadil. "I might be able to buy us some time." Before anyone could object, she addressed the men with a calm but authoritative tone. "Do you even know what you're doing?" she asked. "If you kill us, you'll be tying yourselves to the chief's crimes. Do you really think he'll protect you when the authorities come knocking? Or will he throw you to the wolves to save himself?" The men hesitated, their leader frowning as he considered her words. Sensing the opening, Ayadil and Ifani seized the moment. They moved swiftly, knocking one man to the ground and disarming another before sprinting into the dense forest. The chase was chaotic and desperate, with the sounds of shouting and gunfire echoing through the trees. But Mareo's knowledge of the terrain proved invaluable. She led them through narrow paths and hidden clearings, eventually shaking their pursuers. By the time they reached the outskirts of the city, they were exhausted but alive. Amara, the journalist, met them in a small cafe, her eyes widening as she scanned the documents. "This is incredible," she said, her voice tinged with both excitement and urgency. "This could bring down not just the chief but an entire network of corruption. I'll start working on it immediately." As they left the cafe, Ayadil felt a surge of hope. But he also knew that the fight was far from over. The chief would not take this lightly, and the repercussions would ripple through Olyakosi before the truth could fully take hold. The road back to the village was fraught with tension. Every shadow felt like a threat, every sound a warning. Yet, Ayadil's resolve never wavered. He and Ifani returned to Olyakosi just as dawn broke, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of what was to come but fortified by the belief that they had struck a decisive blow against the tyranny that had plagued their home. In the days that followed, the village braced itself for the storm. But for the first time in years, there was a sense of unity, a belief that, together, they could withstand anything. Ayadil and Zainab stood at the forefront of this movement, their love and courage inspiring others to fight for a brighter future. The battle was far from over, but the seeds of change had taken root, and there was no turning back. The first rays of dawn broke through the thatched roofs of Olyakosi, casting a soft golden light over the quiet village. Despite the serene morning, the air was thick with unease. The villagers, though emboldened by the events of the marketplace, knew that Chief Ola's silence was the calm before a storm. Ayadil and Zainab moved cautiously, knowing that their defiance had placed them directly in the crosshairs of a man who wouldn't hesitate to retaliate. 3 days had passed since Ayadil and Ifani returned from the city with news that Amara had begun her investigation. The journalist had promised swift action, but the wheels of justice turned slowly, especially against someone as powerful and connected as Chief Ola. Meanwhile, rumors of his fury spread like wildfire. He had reportedly doubled the number of guards at his estate, and strangers, like Ayadil, stood in the village square that morning, speaking quietly with Ifani and a few other trusted elders. They had convened to discuss the next steps in their fight, knowing that the chief's inevitable retaliation would be harsh and calculated. Eli hired enforcers had been seen prowling the outskirts of the village. "We can't wait for Amara to act," Ifani said grimly. "The chief is cornered, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous. We need to strengthen our defenses and show him that we won't back down." "But how?" asked Adikunal, an elder whose voice trembled with worry. "We're farmers, traders, and artisans, not soldiers. We don't have the weapons or the numbers to stand against his men." "We have unity," Ayadil interjected, his voice steady. "We prove that in the marketplace. If we can rally the village again, make it clear that we're standing as one, the chief will hesitate. His power lies in dividing us, in making us afraid to act. We can take that power away." As they spoke, Zainab and a group of women worked tirelessly to distribute food and supplies among the villagers. They had formed a network of support, ensuring that no family felt isolated or vulnerable. For Zainab, this effort wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. It showed the people of Alyakosi that their fight was about more than survival, it was about reclaiming their dignity and humanity. That evening, the village square came alive with voices. Men, women, and children gathered around a small bonfire as Ayadil addressed them. He spoke with conviction, recounting the journey to the city and the evidence they had handed over to Amara. He assured them that justice was on its way but emphasized the need for vigilance and solidarity in the days to come. As he finished speaking, an unexpected figure stepped forward from the crowd, Mareo. She had largely kept to herself since returning with Ayadil and Ifani, wary of the villagers' mistrust. But now, she stood tall, her voice clear and unwavering. "I know many of you see me as the chief's ally," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd. "And you're right, I worked for him for years. I helped him enforce his rule, even when I knew it was wrong. But I'm here now because I believe in what Ayadil and Zainab are doing. I've seen the chief's cruelty firsthand, and I've seen the courage it takes to stand against him. If we want to win this fight, we need to trust each other. We need to believe in the strength of our community." Her words were met with silence at first, but slowly, nods of agreement spread through the crowd. The villagers began to see Mareo not as a traitor but as someone who, like them, was fighting for redemption. As the night deepened, the villagers made plans to fortify their homes and organize watch patrols. Ayadil and Ifani worked with a group of young men to create makeshift barricades at key points around the village, using logs and stones to block the paths most frequently used by the chief's men. The first test came 2 nights later. A group of armed thugs sent by Chief Ola attempted to enter the village under cover of darkness. They were met with resistance not from weapons but from the collective will of the villagers. Men and women stood their ground, armed with nothing more than farm tools and their voices. The thugs, unprepared for such defiance, retreated after a tense standoff. News of the confrontation spread quickly, and with it came a wave of hope. The villagers realized that the chief's men were not invincible, that they could be driven back by unity and determination. This small victory bolstered their resolve, but Ayadil and Zainab knew that the chief would not give up so easily. The following week was marked by a series of escalating tensions. Chief Ola sent emissaries to the village, offering bribes and threatening consequences in equal measure. But the villagers stood firm, refusing to be swayed. Amara, true to her word, published a scathing exposé detailing the chief's crimes. The article gained national attention, drawing the interest of law enforcement and anti-corruption organizations. As pressure mounted, Chief Ola made a desperate move. He summoned a meeting in the village square, claiming that he wished to address the community directly. The announcement was met with skepticism, but Ayodele and the others agreed to attend, seeing it as an opportunity to confront the chief publicly. The square was packed that evening, the tension palpable. Chief Ola arrived flanked by his guards, his usual air of arrogance replaced by a forced calm. He began to speak, weaving a narrative that painted himself as a victim of lies and conspiracies. But the villagers were no longer willing to be silent. One by one, they stood up to challenge him, their voices rising in a chorus of anger and defiance. Ayodele stepped forward, holding a copy of the ledger and the documents Mareo had provided. "You can't silence us anymore," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "We've seen the truth, and so has the rest of the country. Your time is over, Chief Ola." At that moment, a sound pierced the tense atmosphere, the wail of police sirens. Vehicles rolled into the square, their lights cutting through the darkness. Amara had followed through on her promise, and law enforcement had finally come to hold the chief accountable. The chief's guards scattered, and the villagers erupted in cheers as officers placed Chief Ola in handcuffs. For the first time in years, the people of Alyakosi felt the weight of oppression lift from their shoulders. As the night gave way to dawn, Ayodele and Zainab stood together, watching as the village came alive with celebration. Their journey had been fraught with danger and sacrifice, but it had also brought them closer to their community and to each other. Alyakosi was free, and its people were determined to rebuild their home, not just with bricks and mortar, but with trust, unity, and hope for the future. Ayodele squeezed Zainab's hand, knowing that their love had been the foundation of this fight. Together, they had shown that even the darkest nights could give way to a brighter dawn. The days that followed Chief Ola's arrest marked a turning point in Alyakosi's history. The once fearful villagers, who had lived under the weight of oppression for years, began to embrace a newfound sense of freedom and empowerment. Yet, the scars of the past ran deep, and the path to healing and rebuilding was fraught with challenges. Ayodele and Zainab, who had become the symbolic leaders of the resistance, found themselves at the forefront of this transformation. The chief's estate, which had stood as a monument to greed and corruption, was seized by the authorities. The villagers, with approval from the local council, decided to repurpose it into a community center. It became a place where meetings were held, disputes were resolved, and dreams for a better future were nurtured. Ayodele, with his carpentry skills, took charge of the renovation efforts, while Zainab organized workshops to teach women new trades, empowering them to contribute to the village's economy. Despite the initial euphoria, the reality of rebuilding was complicated. The chief's loyalists, though leaderless, still lingered in the shadows, resentful of the changes taking place. They spread rumors, sowed seeds of doubt, and attempted to undermine the progress made by the community. One night, Ayodele's workshop was set ablaze, reducing months of labor to ashes. The incident shook the village, but it also galvanized them. The next morning, Ayodele addressed the villagers in the square, his voice firm and unwavering. "They want us to be afraid again," he said. "They want us to believe that we can't stand on our own. But we've proven them wrong before, and we'll do it again. This fire isn't the end, it's the beginning of something greater." The villagers rallied around Ayodele, offering their time, resources, and skills to rebuild the workshop. What could have been a demoralizing setback became a testament to the strength of their unity. Within weeks, the workshop was not only restored but expanded, symbolizing the resilience of Alyakosi. As the months passed, the village underwent a remarkable transformation. The marketplace, once controlled by the chief's thugs, became a vibrant hub of activity. Farmers and artisans thrived, free to sell their goods without fear of extortion. Children who had been forced into labor under the chief's regime returned to school, their laughter and energy breathing new life into the community. Zainab's efforts to empower women bore fruit as well. The workshops she organized led to the creation of a cooperative, where women produced and sold handcrafted goods. Their success inspired others, and soon, men and women alike began exploring new ways to improve their livelihoods. The cooperative's profits were reinvested into the village, funding improvements to infrastructure and education. Amara, the journalist who had exposed Chief Ola's crimes, returned to Alyakosi to document the village's progress. She marveled at the resilience and determination of the people, noting how they had turned their suffering into strength. Her follow-up article captured national attention, drawing visitors and support to the village. But amidst the progress, Ayadil and Zainab faced personal challenges. The intensity of their roles as community leaders left little time for their relationship, and the weight of their responsibilities often took a toll. One evening, after a particularly heated village meeting, Zainab confronted Ayadil. "We've fought so hard for this village," she said, her voice tinged with both frustration and love. "But sometimes it feels like we've forgotten about us." Ayadil sighed, pulling her close. "I know," he admitted. "I've been so focused on the work that I've neglected what matters most." "You're right, Zainab. We need to make time for us, for the love that gave us the strength to fight in the first place." That night, they sat under the stars, much like they had during the early days of their resistance. They spoke not of strategies or challenges but of their dreams and hopes. It was a moment of renewal, reminding them of why they had fought so hard and what they were building together. The years rolled on, and Alyakosi flourished. The village became a beacon of hope, its story inspiring other communities to stand against oppression. Ayadil and Zainab continued to lead with humility and compassion, their love a steady foundation for the progress they achieved. One day, as they walked through the bustling marketplace, they paused to watch a group of children playing near the community center. Among them was a little girl with bright, curious eyes. She looked up at Ayadil and Zainab, her face lighting up with a smile. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice filled with sincerity. The couple exchanged a glance, their hearts swelling with pride and gratitude. In that moment, they knew that everything they had endured, the sacrifices, the battles, the sleepless nights, had been worth it. Alyakosi was no longer just a village. It was a testament to the power of unity, love, and the unyielding spirit of its people. As they walked hand in hand, the sun setting behind them, Ayadil and Zainab felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Their journey had been long and arduous, but it had also been beautiful. Together, they had rewritten the story of Alyakosi, proving that even in the darkest times, hope and love could prevail.